Hi, I'm Cindy from Agahat Co. and Pins and Needles, and today I want to talk about embroidery as art. This is a beautiful book that I found called Vitamin T. It's filled with artists who use fiber in their artwork. So I was just going to show you a couple of examples that I felt that were inspiring. Here's one where it's embroidery on fabric, and I love the contrasting colors, the technique, the images on this piece by Zon Ito. The next one is, I lost it. There it is. All right. So this one is by Britta Maricat Lava, and it's more of a scenic piece of work. So this is embroidery and applique on also on fabric. It's a beautiful piece, and I love the representation. It almost looks lifelike, even though it's fabric and applique and embroidery floss. Okay, so that's this one. So the supplies that you will need just depends on what you want to embroider. So you can use cardboard, a journal, which would be great because you can embroider the front, or you can embroider the front and then continue to do different seams or embroidery stitches or whatever you would like to fill your journal. A piece of craft paper, fabric, scraps. This is all made with scrap fabric, and I did applique and embroidery on this piece of scrap denim that I had, and I did the sun representing the wind here, our mountains, and our running water when you run off the mountains, the rainwater. And then we have this one. Basically, I created this as a flag for my family. So we have the sun on this side, moon and night sky, and then the cactus right down the center that brings us all together. And then you will also need, so like I said, fabric, scrap fabric. It doesn't have to be big pieces. You will need scissors, paper scissors if you're cutting shapes into your paper. Needles. So different size needles would be helpful because it depends on what size thread you're using. I like these little sets because they come in multiple sizes, and it's just easier to have it on hand. And then we have yarn needles, which would be great for children because the ends aren't pointy or sharp, and you could easily like thread a yarn on it. So there's that. Also, if you're using this for children, you might want to pre-punch the holes, because if you shove one of these through a piece of paper, you're probably going to tear it because it's not sharp. So either an awl or a hole punch, anything to create a shape or design for your child to begin to use those motor skills. And then a fork is helpful for the weaving project. You don't need it. Colored pencils if you wanted to draw up a design before you start doing your embroidery. That way kind of you set up your plan ahead of time. A pencil, of course, if you need that. And then embroidery threads or yarn. This is warping thread. This is just sewing thread, which I have here. That will work perfectly fine. It would just take a little longer to fill in some parts of whatever you're working on. All right, so what I have here is this. This is called a warp, but it's also embroidery. It's a very long stitch. So you basically use a long embroidery stitch to create a weave in that stitch. So this is what I did here. I'll show you an example on this one here. This is the example of what I was doing here in the sun. And then we've got a French knot, which is great because it creates a texture, and it actually is raised. It has a lot of texture, and it just depends on how thick your yarn is or fiber. Now we have this one here that I did running stitches around, and then with the sewing thread I just went through and created these long stitches, which you could go back and weave in another color, or you could leave it alone. That's up to you. And then this one is for the kids. So as you can see, this needle is not sharp. It's very dull here. And I pre-punctured some holes with my awl so that you could create the long stitches so your child could weave yarn through it, or paper, or strips of fabric. It's all up to you. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the long stitch for warping and weaving here. So what I did to start it off to make it easier is that I just marked off parts here at the edge of the circle, because it's kind of hard to know how far in to go without your stitches being too close together. So I marked off this here at the end, and then I went in about 1/8 of an inch, and then I marked again. And then after that, once you start adding your stitches, it's going to be easier to identify where to come up again. So what you're gonna do is create a knot at the end. All right, so we're going to come up through this hole here as close as you can, and then pull up, and then you're going to go down that next hole, so now you're going to come up. So we're going to go up next to it instead of going across to this mark here, not here. We're going to come up over here. So basically it's kind of like creating a running stitch on the back of the work. So you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So then pull this through. Now we're going to go through that next mark, and then pull your thread through. All right, so as you can see, it's starting to show your warps here, your long stitches. So now, like I said, we're not going lengthwise to the back, so I don't want to do this to the back. I want it to look like this one here, which is the back of the other weaving project that I had started. So just come up next to it here, about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit bigger. Come back through. Now you're going to go about the same on the top part of your circle and continue working around. Alrighty, so over here are the examples of the weavings that I was doing. I did under 2 over 2 and then repeated it on the next row but opposite. And then over here I just went over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, and just continued that pattern all the way across, and then going back doing the opposite of the row previous to that. I'm out of thread here, so what happens is that what we could do is just clip it, or actually I'm going to show you how to weave, and I'm just clipping part of it and just pulling the tail a little bit. Right now my thread is under the end of this warp, so I'm going to go over it and then under the next one, and then so I'm under the thread or this warp here, so I'm going to go over the next one, under, over, under, over, keep going. Now we're under this one, so we're going over the next, under, over, under, and then that's it here. And so you would repeat that process going back again. I'm under this last one, so I'm going to go over, under the next one, and you'll see that this thread, the weaving thread, is over that second warp. So we're going over, under, over, under, over. So we're going to move on to the next step. We're going to the French knot. So just to go over this real quick, this is the long stitch with weaving in it. And this was your sample of the long stitch to create the warp in a shape of a circle. So then what you do is just wherever you want the knot to be, I'm just going to put it right here, come up through. So take your thread with the left, wrap the thread around the needle 3 times, and then go through next to the hole that you came up from, but don't go through the seam, otherwise you're just going to pull the thread right back out. And you're going to puncture through to the back, and then you pull your thread, and then it creates that knot. And you can see that it's starting to fill in the space. So it'll, like over here, how it started filling in the space really quick, the same thing would go with the thick thread. So I'm going to show you that real quick. I'm just going to cut this. And now you're going to see the difference here. See how much bigger that is? It's way bigger. So that's the French knot. So here's the other one. This is the raise that I did on this one here. So what you're going to do is whatever length you want your ray to be. So let's say I want it to be shorter. I'll puncture the length I want it to be from the edge of my circle. Come up at the edge of the circle, and I leave this thread where it's at, and you leave it where it's here on the edge of the circle, and then it creates the ring. All right, so that's that. Oh, let's get that over here. It doesn't have, this ray doesn't have to be in a circle. It could be just linear, whatever design you want to do with it. All right, so now we have the running stitch with the sewing thread. So I just did a running stitch along the circle, and you could just do the whole thing that way if you would like, but I'm just going to show you how to do it. Move, I guess this is about 3/8 of an inch over, puncture through, and then you could puncture back up next to that. So you'll see it's again about 3/8 of an inch. Then pull your yarn through, or thread, and then you do it again. So you're going to puncture through however long you want your stitch to be, and then go back up, and then pull through, and that's creating a running stitch. And then here we're going to use the sewing thread that I had already started working with, and I was just connecting, either looping through the stitch, or I was going through the holes of the long running stitch stitches around the circle. So I'm here on this side of my circle, so I'm going to come up through this stitch of this running stitch, or this hole of the running stitch, and then I'm going to go down or up to this hole here, and then pull through, and then beside it is the hole from the stitch here too. Come up, and then go back down. So then, okay, we're gonna go up again. We're basically doing the same thing here, but now we're doing it with a thicker yarn. And I'm gonna show you an example of what happens if you don't do the running stitch along the back like we did here. This is what it will look like. So basically you're using extra yarn instead of doing the running stitch in the back, and then it'll be puffier because you added more fiber to the back of the piece too, which is fine, because then they could actually weave on the back too if you want them to, if they want to. And that's it. So there's plastic ones of these. You don't have to have metal, which are safer than these, which when I teach children, I have them use the plastic needles instead. And that's it for today, and thank you, and have fun with embroidery and art.